Hey, everybody. My name is Katherine Andruha, and I'm so excited to be here with you today. I'm the Senior Director of Global SDRs, Sales Development Representatives over at Simpler. And today I'm going to be chatting with you a little bit about change management. And one of the main reasons why I felt like this was such a hot topic for most SDR leaders to know about is simply because I've gone through so many changes. I've helped two companies go through IPO. I've also helped an organization go through an acquisition. And I myself, when I was early on in my career as a financial SDR, went through three different mergers at one company, believe it or not. So change is a constant that I am super used to. And just recently, it's become something I've been working on, not only in myself as I've been growing, but also when working with my SDR teams as well as with my leadership team. So definitely, I know that change is constant. And what that means is it's definitely going to be hitting each of you at one point or another. So why don't we just dive right into it here? Today, we'll talk about, like I said, change management and how it evolves over time, very similar to how a butterfly blossoms from a cocoon. So, why is change so hard for individuals? What is change management? And I will talk about three ways to implement change management within your own organization. So, why is change so hard? Change can bring out fear in most individuals. And change doesn't just happen instantly, it can happen over time. But yes, it can happen in a short amount of time as well. And this instinctually brings out a fight or flight mentality in an individual. It's burning inside of us as humans. And so you can either stick around and be that SDR or that leader that helps your team progress through the changes that they will be encompassing and feeling. Or sometimes leaders tend to run when there's a massive change that happens and realizing that maybe it's not the right environment for them. And very similar to, how a butterfly forms, it takes about 7 to 10 days, believe it or not, for the larva to actually become a chrysalis. And in those 7 to 10 days, the butterfly actually forms and it emerges. And it has to emerge at room temperature. It can't emerge in a cooler temperature. So, as you can see, very similar to how employees are in the workplace, your body and how you react to things, very much so, is like that of a butterfly. So, today we're going to talk about that metamorphosis within your own organization. Change is also really psychological. I'm actually a psych degree major and then minored in marketing, but also have been always fascinated by the human body. In fact, at one point, I changed myself. I'm 6 units away actually from applying to medical school. And instead of going down that path, I found a different path that brought me happiness and passion, which is sales. But our bodies and our brains are actually resistant to change, right? So the minute, and thinking about even my own evolution into sales, the minute that I thought that I wouldn't go to medical school or that I wouldn't pursue this career of being a doctor that I've had since I was a little girl, it was very hard for my brain to compute this. And so imagine just a small change like that. Yes, it's a life change, but imagine a small change like that. And then think about a business change that happens and how that can impact your team. Like I said, our bodies and our brains are designed to resist change. We want routine. Everybody, the human brain essentially likes routine. And so our brain is essentially an energy hungry beast that uses more energy when change comes up because it's trying to adapt itself and figure out which way to go. And this is very instinctual for most individuals when you're thinking about this. Anytime that there is a change, your mind starts to go into overdrive, right? You start thinking a little bit more. Your SDRs are like, oh my gosh, how does this impact me? And it could be a minute change of, hey, we're going to call through these leads views today or not. But most people, if it goes off of their routine, they think, oh my gosh, like what's going to happen next? And so your brain has to be able to adapt and develop new neural pathways and connections to even make that connection on how they can adapt to the change. And adapting to change requires you to really focus more. You have to take a step back and you have to think about, well, how is this change really going to impact me, right? Oh, wait, it doesn't impact me, but that required focus takes you away from your job at hand, right? So it's really important that You take that into consideration when you're employing change within your organization. Continuing on, let's face it, it's really easy for employees, leadership sometimes, to not see change as an opportunity. There are plenty of times that I sit back and I'm like, oh, whoa. If we're going to change the comp plan, how's this going to affect Catherine? Right. And instead of looking at it as, oh, wow, maybe there's a reason for this change. Maybe there's a larger company vision. Maybe there's, a way that we're going to start measuring something differently. Maybe there's a way that we're going to be reporting on something different. And that takes time to realize that change can actually highlight areas for improvement and draw out more opportunities for your team. I think it's really important that you narrate that as you are making a change. This is why we're making this change. For example, if you are planning on employing a new way of following up on leads, and let's say your team isn't calling through your leads queues, it's really important that number one, your SDRs understand why you're even calling through leads in the first place. Explaining the ROI explaining the ROI of a marketing campaign and that each lead actually costs the company money is really important for your team to understand. So they understand that it's not just about calling leads for the sake of calling leads, it costs the company money. And when we book an opportunity with a particular prospect, we want to make sure that we're getting value out of that lead and that ACV ARR is attributed to that campaign. So explaining the reason why we call through leads is really important from a managerial standpoint. And then change might have been implemented in a bad way in the past for those particular employees, right? They may not be used to having a leader like you who's going through every step of the way and walking them through the change. They could have a little bit of PTSD as to how change was brought into their organization. So you have to take that into consideration when you're thinking about how you're going to implement change. Now let's talk about, what is change management exactly, right? So change in itself is very difficult, but how you manage that change is really important to understand. Change management is a systematic approach to dealing with the transition or transformation of an organization's goals, processes, or technologies. The purpose of change management is to implement strategies for affecting change, controlling change, and helping people to adapt to that change. Came directly from Tech Target. Let me simplify this for you. An approach to getting your team on board with the changes you're making, right? We all want people to change the way that they do things. There's a reason why we were brought into the organization, and we want people to trust us and to follow what we're doing. So it's important that all the changes that you make find a way to make a bigger impact on your organization. And so now we're going to talk a little bit about 3 different ways that you can implement change within your own working environment. We're going to identify what it is exactly that you want to change. You want to get buy-in from other leaders, and you want to set expectations and set a plan for those particular individuals. Whether it's a large SDR team, whether it's your ops team, all of these different ways are going to help you implement your change management plan. So what do you actually want to change? You have to identify what it is that you want to change. And I don't mean, oh, I just want to update the leads views. Is it the leads views or is it the leads process? If it's the leads process, you have to look at even deeper. How is your lean data set up? How is your Marketo set up? It's really important that you figure that out before you start pursuing the actual way that you are implementing this change. So when you want to go back in and take a look at what exactly it is that you want to change, you have to think about all of the different steps that you have to take to make that change. You have to be very patient with the process behind change. Changing something within 24 hours, unless it's like a major focus for the entire organization and it's going to cost the company hundreds of millions of dollars, typically doesn't happen overnight. Let's be real with ourselves. And plus, in SDR land, it takes a while to implement change. So I ask you to be super patient with yourself, be patient with your employees, and be patient with your leadership team. Think, is this change actually going to bring value to the organization, or are you just making this change for your own ego? Believe me, it happens all the time. Are you resisting change that maybe somebody else is trying to bring into your organization because it might affect the way that you do things? Change just doesn't have to be about the way you implement it. It can also be about how it affects you within your own organization. So think about that from a different perspective as well. What is it that maybe that other department needs you to change? Be patient. Think about how that might bring value to you. Don't react too quickly. That goes just in life in general. I always tell my managers, you don't need to respond to an email right away, instantaneously. Take some time. Take 30 minutes before you answer. It's okay to think about your thoughts and how your messaging will bring value to that organization. Be concrete with what you plan on changing. You have to go in and know exactly what you're trying to change and why you're trying to change it and the value it's going to bring. You have to have that outlined early. The bullet points are essential to making sure that your change is easily captured by other members of the organization. And as mentioned earlier, you really want to deep dive and investigate what it is you're trying to change. Remember, let's go back to the inbound lead queue. Do you really just want to create a new inbound lead queue? Or are you trying to improve the call volume? Are you trying to improve transparency into what leads your SDRs have access to? Ask yourself the question, why are you trying to change it? And then let that be your path to creating a concrete change management plan. Unfortunately, you're going to have to get political. I know, but you're going to need buy-in from other leaders within the organization. That could mean leaders in sales, leaders in marketing, leaders in operations, leaders on the CSM team if you're trying to employ a new account management team. You need to get other leaders to advocate for you. The more people you have on your side, the more clout you have when you're walking through and expressing the value of your change to the organization. Because ultimately, you really want your leadership team to advocate for you as well. So you want to get your leadership team to have buy-in for you. And I don't necessarily mean the people that you report into. I mean your managers that are reporting into you. Because remember, they're going to be the ones that are going to be implementing this change with your SDRs. And that is critical. You want to make sure that you practice the narration of how you implement this change. And you're going to need to make sure that when you're gathering buy-in from other leaders within the organization, you want to super make sure that your change doesn't negatively impact their departments because you want their buy-in as well. So you want to make sure that you're driving that value within the organization. This happens to be one of the hardest steps in change planning or change management planning in anything else because it requires you to get buy-in from other people. It requires you to convince other people why your change is important before you've even implemented it, before you've even been able to pitch it to your own team. You have to pitch it to other leaders within the organization. And this is really hard for people to do because you have to ask permission, essentially. Ask permission to implement your own change within the org. Now, you're going to want to, when I say that you want to ensure that this change doesn't affect other organizations negatively, what that means is you want to make sure that your change doesn't impact the need for another department to make a change that could make it last longer to implement the change. So you want to make sure that your changes are quick, easy for others to quickly consume and be able to implement. Once you've gotten buy-in, you're going to need to build a plan now. And so what you want to do is you want to set those expectations. You want to share your plan, gather some initial feedback on how you should roll that plan out, and then you're going to execute to drive success. You want to go through building your plan thoughtfully. Not only do you want to get buy-in from other leadership teams on ways that your change could bring value to them, you're going to want their feedback on the best ways to thoughtfully approach this change within your organization. Because no one's going to give you buy-in right away. So it may take you a little bit of time, which, as mentioned in one of the first slides, is to be very, very patient, right? Let the team know where you're actually coming from. This goes back to discussing the ROI of why we follow up on leads for our marketing department. You're going to want to really break it down for every member of the team. And that means all the way from your interns to your SDRs, to your managers, maybe even your directors. But then you're going to have to break it down for marketing. How does it impact them? You're going to have to break down your plan for sales. How does it impact them? And you're going to have to break it down for your operations team and say, how does it affect them? And you're going to have to go on a tour. I always like to call it a plan tour so that you can explain what your plan is to all of these different leadership teams so that you can gather that buy-in. And in that plan, you're going to have to exercise your expectations early on. Not only your expectations of how the plan should be rolled out, but the expectations of the team that they can gather from you. If you're going to implement change, you're going to need to create a training template for your team. You're going to have follow-up meetings for your team because you want your change to be taken into consideration, but also you want your change to be followed through. And you're going to have to explain to the team how this change affects them. What is it that they're worried about? Any questions? Give them that time to really give you that types of feedback. So in that way they feel heard. And embrace your team. Make sure that they're actively participating in it. Some teams aren't used to participating in building out that plan. Some organizations, I've experienced that, where the leadership team has never been asked what their opinion is, or has never been asked to pull the plan together themselves. And bringing the team in for a cohesive organization of this plan is really important because it allows them to have their voices heard, but it allows them to help you tailor your plan. And it allows you to hear maybe how their team might react to certain things as well. So embrace them, hear them out. Show the team what success looks like. Give them examples. If you're planning on changing the comp plan, spell it out 3 different ways. This is how this new comp plan is going to affect you from a monthly standpoint. This is how this comp plan is going to affect you from a quarterly standpoint. And this is how the plan is going to affect you from an annual standpoint. And hopefully those examples will lead to your SDR team showing them they're going to make even more money by utilizing this new comp plan. So you're going to have to do that type of example setting initially, and you're going to have to keep repeating yourself. The most important tip that I can give you right now is you're going to have to reiterate this plan at least 3 different ways. You're going to have to write the plan out, not only in a PowerPoint, but you're going to want to put it into an email as well, explaining each step of the plan. You're going to want to hold a meeting where you roll out the plan in a big group setting and then with each of your individual SDR groups. For example, if you have an inbound team, how does it affect your inbound team? If you have an outbound team, how does it affect your outbound team? And if you have an account management team, how does it affect your account management team? So group consensus, then individual group consensus. And then you're going to ask them to execute on that. And you're going to have follow-up trainings. You're going to have follow-up enablement. You're going to have follow-up emails. So I highly recommend creating scripts for your managers to help with implementing a change, similar to what HR does if there's a larger organizational change. Think about the bullet points. Think about the questions that your team is going to ask you and be ready to answer their questions. And really listen to what their questions are, because their questions can tweak and change with what that type of change is. So just be prepared and ready to roll out your plan. If you're not prepared, it can come off very wishy-washy and you immediately lose that buy-in from not only your SDR team, but also your leadership team. So I'm hoping that those 3 methods help you roll out change management plans. But what's most important for me is how do you embrace leadership, how do you embrace change management as a leader? As I've said before, be patient. Change is always going to come. It's a constant. Be prepared for it. Be proactive. If you hear of a change coming, start thinking about a way that you can implement that change before it's asked of you. Continually follow up with your team. Send surveys. Find out if it's working. After 2 weeks, ask for that feedback. I always say, if you get feedback right away before the change is implemented within an organization, sometimes it can come off as resistance. So ask your team, hey, do you guys mind giving me 2 weeks to roll this out? And then I would really like to gather your thoughts then to see what part of the process might be broken or what part of the process is actually working. 2 weeks gives everybody a chance to get buy-in, but also gives chance for the SDRs to give you some feedback as well. And rely on your mentors, your colleagues, and even your friends. It's going to be a stressful time. Implementing change is never easy, and you're always going to have to iterate and change depending on the group that you're working through. But in the end, like I've said, change is a constant, and we all know that change is necessary. So thank you so much. I hope you picked up some tips and tricks. If you'd like to connect with me on LinkedIn, feel free. Please mention that you watched this session in the LinkedIn note so that I know what to refer to. But such a pleasure having you all here, and good luck on the next change that you need to implement. Take care.